Right, hello everybody. I'm sorry this is a bit late. Um, yes, this is a bit late. This one. I didn't do it on Sunday because I just wanted a quiet day. So we have the third part of chapter one of the last Sherlock Holmes story. Um, the police have received a letter from Jack the Ripper, and so yeah, I'll carry on from there. Don't mind me giving the trade name. A few lines had been added to the letter crosswise as a postscript. Wasn't good enough to post this before. I got all the red ink off my hands, curse it. No luck yet, they say. I'm a doctor now. Ha ha. I returned the extraordinary document to Holmes, who was studying the envelope intently through his magnifying glass. Nothing to be learned from the paper, he murmured. The letter is dated the 25th, yet the postmark gives the 27th. Why didn't he post it sooner? Keep this letter back till I do a bit more work, then give it out straight. By Jove, he was worried lest the press lacked the necessary patience. You realise what this means, of course. Lestrade and I gazed mutely at Holmes, who wrapped the letter with his fingertips. Why he is good at telling you this, that he will attempt another murder within the next few nights. I was that all, Lestrade laughed. For a moment I thought you had spotted something. I can read as well as you, Mr. Holmes. But why should we believe what he says? It is most likely all a trick. Holmes shook his head impatiently. Never mind that, he said. Observe what he does. If he merely wished to confuse us, he would have posted the letter as soon as written on Tuesday. Why should he delay? But instead he deliberately keeps the letter back until Thursday, and then urges the press not to make it public until he gets to work again. This must mean he knows beyond all doubt that another killing will take place, and within a few days. Then his letter can be published with the maximum effect. This man is waging a campaign of terror, and he understands very well that nothing is so necessary as a fine sense of timing. Come, Holmes, I protested. You are surely overlooking the fact that the writer of this letter is a crude and simple fellow. You are making him out a man of intelligence and sophistication. When he is all too evidently a vulgar and illiterate ruffian. You speak more wisely than you know, Watson. All too evidently, indeed. Now I dare say I know more vulgar and illiterate ruffians than you, and I can assure you that none of them would perpetrate such a concoction as this. On the contrary, it is characteristic of that type that since writing is unnatural to them, they do it unnaturally. Their style is invariably cramped, their dictation arch and stiff. But our correspondent, who signs himself as Jack the Ripper, is quite an indifferent sort. He uses his cant and his solecisms to achieve an effect, as though he were writing advertisements. Sorry, I'll get that right in a minute. Advertisements for the latest brand of Liverpool. Advertisement. Sorry, I tell you, I get it right. He uses his cant and socialisms to achieve an effect as though he were writing advertisements for the latest brand of Liverpools. To be sure, he wishes the public to picture him as a violent, low-class tough, which merely strengthens my conviction that he is in fact a gentleman, well-spoken, well-dressed, and quite probably inanely respected by a wide circle of acquaintances. Lestrade eyed me silently and winked. It was only with difficulty that I refrained from returning the gesture. Holmes' description was so totally contrary to every current opinion, as well as the ordinary common sense, that I could not help wondering if he were indulging himself in a joke at our expense. But his features betrayed no hint of irony. He seemed, indeed, more than usual serious. Evidence, he cried. That's what I need. Evidence. Not the evidence he chooses to give out in his letter, nor what is left over in a horde of this morbidly curious have sorry, nor what is left after a horde of the morbidly curious have trampled over the scene of the crime at sixpence a head. No, if our man is successful in carrying out his threat, I must be on the spot. He turned to Lestrade. What preventative measures are you contemplating? Measures? Why, every spare man on the force has been drafted into Whitechapel. My only worry is that the killer will see that we've made the distinct too hot to hold him, and to go somewhere else. If he was to try his luck at Bethnal Green or Stepney, he might go many a mile without seeing a policeman. Pshaw! Your fears are quite groundless, Lestrade. All the murder tactics so far have been expressly designed to create a confrontation between himself and the authorities. A confrontation he intends to win. Why else would he alert you to his intentions? To go elsewhere now would be tantamount to admitting defeat. Besides, it is obvious that his letter, that he shares the low opinion of the force that is so sadly prevalent these days. He will find a very warm welcome. He will find a very warm welcome awaiting him if he does come back. I can promise you that. Lestrade avertedly stoutedly. Quite apart from our own patrols and those of the vigilant groups, we have very little surprise up our sleeves. If the killer isn't very careful, he may well find that he has picked one of my constables and to try an assault. One of your constables? That's why I said, Mr. Holmes, this is highly confidential, of course. But you may be interested to learn that each night a body of our finest men patrolling the streets of Whitechapel in female attire as decoys trap the maniac. A moment of strained silence followed this revelation. Then Holmes and I burst simultaneously into uncontrollable laughter. Lestrade coloured deeply. I don't see anything funny, he snapped. I don't see anything funny, he snapped. When it is a question of protecting the public and of apprehending criminals, I am proud to say that there are no lengths to which the Metropolitan Police are not prepared to go. My dear fellow, you must excuse us, cried Holmes. I feel sure I speak for Dr. Watson in saying that I have nothing but the highest regard for the courage and devotion of your colleagues. It's just, that the idea of your colleagues. It's just, the idea of our brawny and Hershore bobbies got up in Lindsay skirts and velvet bonnets takes a little getting used to. Lestrade's face was a picture of injured righteousness. It seems there's no pleasing you, Mr. Holmes. You never tire of criticising us for doing things by the book, but as soon as we try something out of the ordinary, you laugh in our faces. Well, I have more pressing business than I have more pressing business than to sit here joking with you two gentlemen. If I had known you weren't interested in working with us on this case, I wouldn't have troubled you. He got to his feet. Holmes also rose. You're quite mistaken if you think I'm uninterested in the case, Inspector, he said soothingly. On the contrary, nothing would give me greater pleasure than to be associated with your investigation. As I've said, I think it's most likely that the murderer will attempt to strike within the next few nights. It is therefore imperative that our plans should be laid. If it is convenient, I propose we meet this afternoon at the yard to discuss our strategy. Suitably mortified by the overture, Lestrade left in much better humour. Holmes saw him out, returning to the room with an expression of great glee. What a tonic our good Lestrade is, to be sure, he cried. Believe me, Watson, if you ever felt that you are growing old and stupid, the best cure I know is the company of one of Her Majesty's detectives. They really should be hired out by the hour, so that doctors could prescribe the remedy. Surely you are a little harsh, I objected. The authorities seem to me to have done everything that can be expected. Exactly, my dear fellow. That's what I find so amusing. They do just what one expects, like so many clockwork toys. I must admit, though, the latest stroke of Lestrade is something I had not foreseen. Policemen in petticoats. I certainly hope they have not. I certainly hope they have their wits about them, or before long, the illustrated papers might be proclaiming the discovery of the horribly mutilated body of a policeman dressed in Hawes rags in Spatfield's alley. Imagine that, Watson. I could not. I could not but deploy the banter, and I sought to turn the conversation to more seemingly courses. Come now, Holmes. You rally the authorities freely enough. But what is your own solution? You refuse to give even a hint of daylight, yet you mock others for blundering in the dark. That's hardly sporting, you know. Well said, old friend. No doubt I have been liberal with my jibes, and it is true I have no more idea of the murderer's identity than Lestrade does. But I do at least have a clear idea of what kind of man he is. Here he is a beast, a savage. Here he is a beast, a savage. That much is plain enough. Holmes glanced at me keenly. I believe you have a theory, Doctor. Out with it. I believe you have a theory, Doctor. Out with it then. It is all free for all at this stage. All right then. I believe that the murder of these poor women is some hellhound like Tangoa. I note that the killings have only occurred close to the docks. Suppose that this native is employed as a deckhand on some foreign ship, fresh from the barbarous homeland. He is set loose in London. Crazed with drink, he roams the streets by night. Then, chancing upon some penniless, unfortunate huddled in a doorway, he kills her in some savage frenzy. He then slips back on board the ship, which sails at first light. His tracks are thus effectively covered, and when the vessel returns a few weeks later, he is free to indulge in another bloodbath. Holmes applauded enthusiastically. Capital, Doctor. Really first rate. If I were in the market for a theory, I would sooner take yours than half a dozen others. I have heard, in fact, there is still more evidence that you might adduce in its favour. The arrangement of the objects around Chapman's body, for instance, might be explained as a heather in right. I know nothing of that. The killer took the rings from her fingers and laid them out carefully at her feet, together with a few coins. By her head, he placed a part of an envelope, and you have heard Dr. Phillips' evidence about the arrangement of the intestines on her right shoulder. Does that not suggest some of the ritual sacrifice? I could scarcely believe my ears. With each new detail, the case seemed to grow darker and more unfathomable. It's devilish, I cried. It certainly had been made to appear so, evidently. One of the inmates of the boarding house, Chapman, frequently identified the envelope as being the property of the deceased. She had been with it early that night, but at that time it was lacked the mark it bore later when it was found by Chapman's head. What mark was that? The letter M, a capital M. That would seem to put paid to your ignoble savage, Watson. Perhaps one of his fellow seamen had taught him a few letters, I suggested feebly. Or perhaps my voice died away. Holmes nodded. Aye, perhaps you have the key to this whole affair. Perhaps have you heard of Occam's razor? What? I was rather startled by the sudden change of tack. I don't believe I have. It is one of the few safety models. One of the few safety models. Hardly. It has been with us for over 500 years. It is a philosophical axiom. In its original form, it runs, "Eta non stat multiplicandum." I see. In other words, entities should not be necessarily mutilated. But now, Doctor, how many theories are necessary to solve a problem? I sat up straight and endeavoured to collect my thoughts. How many are necessary? Well, just one, as long as it's the correct one, of course. Precisely. But when we come back to look into these Whitechapel murders, what do we find? Handful of theories by the score, one penny plain and twopence coloured. Every man you meet has his own, and every hour brings with it fresh one. So let us try all these prolific hypotheses upon old William of Ockham's cutting edge. Are they necessary to explain the facts? They are not. Do they bring us any nearer to apprehending the criminal? They do not. Do they enable us to predict what he is likely to do in the future? No. Then what are they? The answer, my dear Watson, is that they are no use whatsoever to us, but of the very great value to the murderer. As Holmes expounded his argument, his tone grew more heated and his gestures correspondingly more intense. At length he leapt up from his chair and began to pace the floor. I said that I have a clear idea of the kind of man he is. Watson, perhaps you should begin perceive the outlines. You must put all the conventional notions out of your head. We are dealing with an artist of misdirection with an uncanny knack of manipulating the public mind. And there we shall end it. Part 4 will be on Sunday. I hope you're enjoying this. And thank you very much for tuning in. And yes, I'm in my pyjamas. Thank you very much for watching. Bye-bye for now.